Good morning, vinyl community, Beatles community, and anyone else watching. It's Matt. I'm back with another video. It's been a while, about 6 or 7 days or so. Reason being, I've been fighting a real bad cold this winter, folks. I don't know how the rest of you are faring out there with the weather this year and the various viruses and bugs going around, but boy, I'm never sick, but it really kicked my butt this year. Anyway, I'm feeling a little better today. I'm hoping I'm getting there. So I thought I'd make another video for you. And as you can see from the heading, I'm focusing on the Hey Jude album. It was originally titled The Beatles Again, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But basically, the Beatles Hey Jude album, released in February of 1970, and I'll explain why I'm doing a little tribute to it in a minute here. Basically, it was an album that contained a lot of non-album singles and B-sides. It was released on CD for the first time in 2014. That was the first time you could officially get the Beatles Hey Jude album on a CD. And it was part of the US albums box set. And you could also buy it individually. Just to show you real quick, they came with a little paper strip on it with the song titles. And here's the CD, set up basically just like the album. And it had the the Apple label on it, Apple label on it. There you go. And that was the first and only time you could get it on CD, was in 2014 on that US Albums box set. So I do have that. And I'm holding up an original version right here, and you can see, if it shows up in the video at all, it's pretty beat up a little bit. There's some Scotch tape on the top holding the binding together. The bottom, I think there's a little tape over here on the side that's also holding it together. But I'll explain that in a minute. Basically, this album, I also read on this album that the cover sides were switched, that originally the back side here was supposed to be the front cover of this album. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding, this was supposed to be the front cover of the Hey Jude album, and somehow it got switched in error, and it ended up that they used what was going to be the back cover as the front cover. Personally, I think this is just fine as a front cover. It's a great picture. You can get it on t-shirts and many other Beatles items. It's just an iconic photo, a photo that everybody is very familiar with. And I also think this is a great picture on the back here. Both of them are great. They're both from the Beatles' last ever photo session. Believe it or not, the last time the Beatles ever worked together as a foursome to do a photo session or a video session, whatever you want to call it, was on this date, which was August, I want to say late August 1969 was the last time the Beatles ever got together and did a photo session together. And I think Linda McCartney was on hand with a film camera and also took some film of that last photo session, which you can see on the anthology if you get a chance. It's really great color footage of these photo sessions. But there you go. The last time the Beatles were together for a photo session, and they took some great shots, as you can see. Now, my other understanding with this album is that it didn't make #1 on Billboard in the United States, only went to #2, but over the years it sold over 3 million copies. And the reason I'm focusing on it today is because if you remember from my first video, the Meet the Beatles tribute I did, my very first one, that was the album that was the first one I ever received in my life. I was a very young boy, and you can go back to that video where I explain it. But that was the first album I ever received or had as a very young child, was Meet the Beatles. This one, folks, is the first album that I ever obtained on my own. Okay, I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I had some, Christmas or holiday money, or I can't even remember where the money came from, but it was gift money that I had. And so my mother took me to a local department store, and I remember at the time, I wasn't specifically looking for this album. If you remember from one of my earlier videos, I talk about having the Beatles Story album and hearing the Beatles playing live for about just under a minute, doing Twist and Shout at the Hollywood Bowl. At the start of one of the sides of the Beatles Story album, the Beatles can be heard playing Twist and Shout for about 50 seconds, opening the side of the album live from the Hollywood Bowl. And it's very exciting, it's rocking, and it got me excited about that song, Twist and Shout. I just wanted that song, Twist and Shout. I had to get it and find out what album the song was on, which was, as you know, the early Beatles. For us people growing up in North America, was the early Beatles. And we went to the department store, and like I said, I had this holiday money, and I was going to specifically look for the album, which was the early Beatles, that had Twist and Shout on it. Well, when we got there, they didn't have the early Beatles. It wasn't there. And back in those days, my mother wasn't going to jump in the car and drive me all over creation looking for this album. It was basically, we're at the department store, you want a Beatles album, you want to spend some money on an album, you're going to have to pick one from the selection that's here. So I was a little bummed out about that because I really wanted the early Beatles with Twist and Shout. So instead, there was a large selection of these albums because at the time, being early 1970, this was the new Beatle album. Okay, Abbey Road had been released the previous, September or something like that, September, October, '69. And Let It Be wasn't out yet, wasn't going to be coming out till April or May. So this was the new Beatles album in February of 1970. And so basically, this is the album that I got instead for those few bucks. I want to say it was like $3.98 or $4. Maybe somebody can help me. You know, what was the average new record price back in 1970? But it wasn't that much. It definitely wasn't over $5. And I don't think I had that much over $5 anyway. So maybe it was $3.98 or $4. But I bought this album and took it home and loved it from the beginning. A little bit smidgen of some older stuff with Can't Buy Me Love and I Should Have Known Better. Some middle period Beatles with Paperback Writer and Rain, and then I got into some really great later Beatles with Don't Let Me Down, certainly Old Brown Shoe, a classic George song, and so many great songs on this album. Yeah, it's a little bit of a hodgepodge, thrown together like some of the early Capitol albums were, but boy, you know what, when you're a young boy and you're thinking this is the new Beatles album, and you get that selection of songs on here, Lady Madonna, Ballad of Johnny Yoko. It just blew me away. It was so varied. The sounds from Can't Buy Me Love, which I believe is the first song, kicks off the album right to the end. The stuff recorded in '69 or so, it just knocked me out. I just thought this was the greatest thing. And believe it or not, this is my original Hey Jude album that I bought in the store with my mother all those years ago in 1970. I still have my original, and here it is, Scotch tape and all, folks. And you can see it is pretty beat up. I mean, look at some of the binding on it and that. But I've kept it all these years, and I'll even show you the vinyl. I've kept it pretty good. It's on the original Apple label. A little beat up and scratched. I would never play this one anymore because, as I told you with my original Meet the Beatles vinyl, which is really bad and doesn't even have a cover, I keep it more for posterity, more for sentimental reasons. First album I ever bought on my own, folks, right here. I don't play it anymore, as I said. I kind of keep it for sentimental reasons because several years ago I did go out and pick up another one. So I could keep my original one with the Scotch tape and all around the edges, keep that as nice as I could, and I did pick up this one, which is in much better shape. Not perfect, pristine condition. I'm always looking for an upgrade, but I wanted an original on the Apple label, and I picked this one up. And as you can see, it's a little better condition on the original Apple label. And I grabbed that one. I also, as a curio, I was in a store, maybe someone here can help me, but it might have been it was back in the 80s or so, I'm not sure. But there came a point where Capitol EMI was re-releasing some of these albums. And they released the Hey Jude album. However, and I can see I have a real nice one here in mint condition, but it's not on the Apple label, it's on Capitol Rainbow Swirl label, which I thought was very unique to see a Beatles album, which was always originally on Apple, and to see it on the Capitol Rainbow Swirl is kind of mind-blowing. So I did pick it up. It's in great shape, and I grabbed that one. As I said, I also, back in 2014, bought the CD, first time you could get it on CD, in the box set, the US albums. And I also have an original, no, not an original cassette. This cassette came out much later, I want to say, but right before cassettes were kind of, became defunct, so to speak. I did pick up a cassette of Hey Jude, again for the sentimental reasons. It was the first album that I ever bought with my own money. There you go. And it's still in the shrink. I just never opened it to use it for anything, but I do have it. So there you go. It's, again, a great album. One I'm very happy that I can proudly say was the first album I ever bought with my own money. I do listen to it quite often on occasion. As a matter of fact, after the '09 remasters came out, a friend of mine was so into this album and he was so desperate to have it on a CD that he actually took the 2009 remasters series and he put together a little, he burned a CD complete with covers and everything. I don't have it right handy with me, but I do have it still. And he burned this album in sequence on a CD, gave me a copy, and he kept a copy for himself. And I really appreciate that because it wasn't until 2014 you could officially get it on CD. Okay, so there you go, my tribute to the Beatles Hey Jude album, or as originally titled, The Beatles Again. Oh, and just to show you, on here it's called Hey Jude. But if you look on those original versions, The Beatles Again. And I'm pretty sure, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, that if you have an original version, you'll know it by the label on the Apple saying The Beatles Again. Again, the labels were printed, many of the labels were printed before they decided on the name change. So, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane for the Beatles Hey Jude album. Early 1970, February of 1970 release. First album I ever bought on my own. Thanks. Have a great day. Take care, and God bless. Bye-bye.